Have you ever wondered what it would be like to really fly just yourself with your own set of wings? Well, Dave Kilborn knows. In a matter of minutes, he can set up his kite and be ready to go. Even his wife Donna has taken up flying. Dave was the first person ever to run off a mountain in a giant delta wing kite. And because he proved that it could be done, there are now thousands of flyers just like him. Donna flies in her very own special kite that Dave built just for her weight and size. Just a few quick steps, scrunch into your seat for security, and you're on your way at all of 20 miles an hour. In a kite, there are no moving parts except yourself, and to turn, all you have to do is shift your weight. Close to the ground, all you have to do is push forward, and landings can be as easy as stepping off a curb. Don't tell anybody, but these kites are so basic, they could have been built and flown off the pyramids centuries ago, using bamboo and linen cloth. The only ingredient missing was the idea. Part of the joy of kite flying is to discover a new site and fly it before anyone else does. Dave Kilborn found this spot about 100 miles from his home using local topographical maps which indicate whether or not a hill is steep enough to fly from. Dave was so anxious to drive to the top, he forgot to pick out a landing spot at the bottom. But this is what flying by the seat of your pants is all about. From the top, Dave thought he could land in this little meadow he was now overshooting. When a person has to dodge trees and barbed wire fences, he's grateful to land just about any place. But Donna thought he did just fine. Dave felt he probably couldn't duplicate that exact landing spot again, and really wouldn't care to try.
Man, that was close.
Return with us now to the thrilling days of yesteryear, when kites were small and legs were fast. Takeoffs used to be really difficult because the early mountain flyers were using converted water ski kites. You had to run about 80 miles an hour to get off the mountain if there was no wind. It took a lot of guts to go all out and have the faith that 35 pounds of tubing and Dacron would actually lift you up into the air. In this flight, off a 1,500-foot high section of the Ortega Mountains, Dave Kilborn and Carl Banish do a little ground skimming. This low-level flying is kind of like skiing in the air, swooping down sunlit canyons just inches off the brush. You really feel like a bird, and it seems like there's nowhere you can't go. No matter how exhilarated you get on these flights, you still can't let yourself become too careless. The laws of aerodynamics still apply, and if you break them, they'll probably break you and your kite. Luckily, this stall for Chris Wills meant only an invigorating climb back up the hill.
And now, students, we are fortunate to have in our possession documentary footage of the famous kamikaze school of kite flying. Watch closely these perfected techniques. Number 1, the basic keel snap. Number 2, the side shuffle followed by a perfectly executed ground loop. Whoa! Number 3, the oh my god total wipeout on real rocks. Notice how the flyer closely examines the terrain for a landing place. Number 4, a combination touch and go, side shuffle, Fosbury flop with a keel snap finale. What a performance. Number 5, the world's shortest kite flight. And finally, students, watch closely the treetop touchdown.
Oh no!
A technique not to be tried by novices, intermediates, or experts.
Hey man, you game to try it again?
Yeah, okay. Bill Moyes, the Australian birdman, is a pioneer of kite flying in the truest sense of the word. He is the Evel Knievel of Australia, where kiting first got off the ground. Bill Moyes' early exhibitions were often dangerous, what with overhead power lines to dodge and car drivers who had never seen a kite before, let alone tow one. On one of these flights, the driver pulled him so fast, his kite disintegrated in midair. Good for a ride to his favorite hospital. But probably the best-known Australian birdman is Bill Bennett, since he's the guy who brought the first delta-wing kite to the United States. Bill hitched his kite to a high-speed powerboat and was hoping that if he could tow long enough and high enough, he could top Moyes' altitude record of 3,000 feet. 30 minutes later, after paying out 1.5 miles of tow line, Bennett succeeded, acing out Moyes with 100 feet to spare. But unbeknownst to Bennett, Bill Moyes was in Avery, Wisconsin, planning to put the record on ice. Moyes flew his 14-foot kite behind a Super Cub airplane to over 9,000 feet, more than triple Bennett's Havasu record. Moyes' reinforced water-ski kite was strained to the limit as he flew it up to 65 miles an hour in sub-freezing temperatures and without wearing a parachute.
Congratulations. You look good.
Moyes was king and landed without a scratch.
But you're going to lose it all there. Oh, that was beautiful.
But as fate would have it, 1 week later in Tracy, California, a dark horse was preparing to upstage both Australian birdmen. This time, a mammoth hot air balloon was the launch vehicle, fitted with a special lightweight basket and extra fuel. Dave Kilbourne had come down off the hills of Mission Ridge to attempt to fly higher than any kite had ever been flown before. Like Moyes, he had so much confidence in his kite that he felt a parachute was unnecessary. The balloon snapped Dave off the ground much faster than he planned for, and Donna noticed that the force had bent the crossbar tubing down a foot on each side. Donna was hoping that Dave would come down with the balloon, rather than releasing and chancing it. Dave himself was having second thoughts about not wearing a parachute. After 45 minutes of constant climbing, the balloon was rising poorly in the thin air at 10,000 feet. But no two ways about it. Dave was going for the record. The billow of the sail pulled the bent tubing back into its proper place, as Dave had hoped. But even then, he didn't waste any time in getting back down to good old Mother Earth. The record was now out of the hands of the Australians and back in the United States. And here we are at one of the largest air shows of all time, Transpo, USA. The first large gathering of kite enthusiasts occurred on a grassy slope near San Francisco. Dave Kilbourne, flying his two-wheeler, organized the meet, and flyers from Oregon to San Diego had driven for hundreds of miles to participate. Most were novices and had never flown before. This guy finished his kite when he ran out of saran wrap. He had to spend 4 hours getting the grass stains off his pants. But crashes and grass stains are all part of the curriculum here at the Coyote Hill School of Hard Knocks. The first thing you have to do is master the takeoff. Before long, you'll be ready for your first perfect three-point landing. Bill Bennett thought he'd be one up on everybody by installing a backpack engine on one of his flyers. It definitely won the noise pollution prize and flew almost as far as a kite without an engine. In the early afternoon, the winds picked up, and there was only one person willing to fly, Bob Wills. A 25-mile-an-hour wind that had grounded everyone else was just what Bob needed to work on his crazy whoop-de-doos. Bob was actually a newcomer to kite flying, but even Dave Kilbourne had to recognize this guy's unusual coordination and flying ability. A few criticized Bob's tricks because they felt that students would try to copy him and get hurt. But Bob wants to have no limitations except nature herself when it comes to flying a kite. This is what soaring is all about, and it's every flyer's dream to be able to soar. Later that afternoon, people started gathering on the far hill. Bob Lovejoy, a toy designer by trade, had designed a kite that looked like a real airplane, and he called it the Quicksilver. This hang glider has a glide ratio of nearly twice that of a standard kite, about 8 to 1. And once you get it up in the air, it's almost hard to get it back down. One time, some guy got caught in the thermal flying his Quicksilver and was sucked up over a mile high. Before long, they'll be able to make flights of several hundred miles in hang gliders like these. Dave Kilborn and many of the early kite flyers got started in kiting behind a boat. Getting up is just like a regular water ski takeoff, and once you get going about 20, the kite can lift you right off. The water ski kite is exactly the same as a regular kite, except that the control bar is beefed up and made out of stainless steel instead of aluminum to take the tension of the tow rope. Those red things on the end of the control bar are floats, needed only for takeoff and landing. If you can borrow your friend's ski boat, and if you know how to water ski, you can certainly learn how to fly. Water towing is an ideal way to get into hang gliding. Why? Because water is soft. Come wintertime, Lake Tahoe gets a bit too cold for water kiting, so Dave and his friends take to the mountains. Any mountain will do, as long as there's an easy way to the top. Turned out they didn't have to go very far. Homewood Resort, overlooking beautiful Lake Tahoe, seemed to be the perfect place to start.
Whoa!
Dave really wasn't sure what to expect kiting off snow for the very first time. In fact, he'd only been snow skiing a couple times in his whole life. Well, there's only one way to find out. Here we go. If nothing else, Dave is finding out that snow kiting is an easy way to get over those big moguls, no sweat. Maybe you can get away with being an average snow skier, but you'd better be an advanced kite flyer to handle a course like this. Some ski trails can be quite narrow, with 100-foot pine trees on either side, and panicky skiers underneath. If you miss a turn, you're looking at pine needles and chipmunks, face to face. When they got to the bottom of the hill, Dave and John decided that what they really needed was a good loud horn. For John, it's now people dodging time. And again, this demonstrates the remarkable maneuverability of the Rogallo wing.
Track right, track left. Hey, track left.
That was easy. Let's go do it again.
Beep, beep. Hit it.
Towing behind cars was another way the early kite flyers got up in the air. All you needed was a car, some rope, and a sensible driver. But there was little room for errors. A spill that might be humorous over water could be fatal over land. Because a car has relatively unlimited towing power, a kite can be stressed up to 10 times more under tow than it is under a free glide. You don't see car towing much nowadays because there are just too many things to go wrong for the average kite flyer. who needs a car when nature can give you all the lift you want? Just ask Bob Wills. He was the first person to tame the often treacherous flying site at Palmdale, California, where he stayed aloft for over 2 hours in heavy turbulence, beating Dave Kilbourne's historic 1-hour flight the hard way. The lift at Palmdale is great, but the turbulence can be rough. How did Wills get started in hang gliding? Well, would you believe truck towing?
Wait, I'm not ready. Stop! Hey, stop! Stop! Wait! Stop! Stop that thing!
But high winds and truck towing are really not where it's at. When California flyers go looking for smooth air, beautiful surroundings, and that all-day kind of lift, they go to Torrey Pines. Just north of San Diego, the 400-foot cliffs face directly into the glassy smooth winds off the Pacific.
Look around, 'cause it's all about you. Can it be there's something there? Come along and we'll fly together up into my playground in the sky. High as an eagle, free as a dove, I'm up in the air with a feeling I love. My heart feeling free and my head's in the clouds. I'm soaring so high, I'm above all the crowd. I'm over the ocean, I'm over the trees, I'm floating everywhere on the wings of a breeze. Birds in the sky have got nothing on me. As long as I'm here, that's how long I'll be free. Look around, 'cause it's all about you. Can it be there's something there? Come along and we'll fly together up into my playground in the sky. Oh, up into my playground in the sky. Look around.
Dave Kronk is another one of the real pioneers in hang gliding. He was one of the first to use a high-degree nose angle in the standard regallo. He made a prototype using a plastic sail, and it took him nearly a year to perfect. After numerous tests off the 25-foot hills at Playa del Rey, California, he was ready for Torrey Pines. Dave had to put spoilers on each wingtip, operated by lines attached to his swing seat, in order to turn the mammoth creature. But, like a butterfly, he could float on a breath of air and stay aloft when others were forced to land. Volmer Jensen proves that there are no age limits in hang gliding. At 63, he has built one of the most efficient hang gliders in the world. The ship weighs about 100 pounds in dead air, but facing into a 15-knot wind will become weightless. Volmer has been building gliders all of his adult life, and actually built several hang gliders before World War II. When the hang glider movement was revived, he scaled down a conventional sailplane glider and mounted himself hanging under the wing instead of sitting in the cockpit. On the dashboard, he mounted a wind meter, altimeter, and a stick that controls the rudder, elevator, and ailerons. His ship falls only 1 foot for every 10 it goes forward, which enables it to keep gliding in light winds when others are forced to land. When Vollmer flies over the Southern California hills, the sheep aren't the only ones who do double takes. Many middle-aged people see Vollmer fly over their homes and get so curious they end up flying hang gliders themselves. At 63, Vollmer Jensen continues to build and fly hang gliders and has no plans to retire. This sport is going to force a lot of people to redefine old age. At the other end of the age spectrum, but equally gifted, Taras Kasenik, at only 18 years old, designed and built this biplane he calls the Icarus II. It weighs only 55 pounds and can maintain in a 12-knot wind. Taras can sit up with the seagulls at Torrey Pines all day long if he chooses, and watch the kites below him. Since his father is the director of Mount Palomar Observatory, Taras has naturally had his eyes on the sky. After the Icarus II, he built an advanced monowing he calls the Icarus V. It is extremely stable due to the special warping of the wing. Taras was able to use Caltech's multi-million-dollar computer to design the airfoil for this tailless glider. It weighs only 65 pounds, has a 10-to-1 glide ratio, and has gained thousands of feet in thermals when other kites are falling out of the sky. Taras is an unusually gifted contributor to the hang gliding movement. He has the coordination of a 20-year-old, the maturity of a 30-year-old, and the intellect of a 40-year-old. Add all of these up, and you get a 90-year-old aeromaniac. Another fixed-wing flyer, Mark Smith, is a model RC glider champion. He took one of his models and built it big enough to fly in it himself. Hanging only by his armpits and not strapped in, Mark felt a little queasy, thinking he might fall out. Every kid wonders what it's like to fly in a model. Now somebody knows. Building these advanced wings isn't as easy as it looks. Back in the good old days, hang gliders were made the night before a meet, using whatever materials you could beg or borrow. Consequently, you never flew any higher than you were willing to fall. Just about all of these early hang gliders could be folded up for easy storage. Let's face it, back in those days, getting up in the air really wasn't the problem. It was how you got back down. But the battle for the perfect landing goes on. But there's nothing that quite equals the excitement and terror of your very first flight. Even an 80-foot sand dune looks like a mountain. At 15 years old, Ernie Fair was one of the youngest flyers around, and he was hoping that if he could only get through this moment, he would live to be one of the oldest. That's the wrong way, Ernie. But there comes a time in every young man's life when he must face that moment of truth. When the fog rolls in, flying activity generally comes to a halt, with a few minor exceptions. I tried to tell him. Some hang gliders are definitely not one-man operations. This one took a dozen guys and the world's longest rubber band to get it airborne. Back to the old drawing board. In contrast to these hang gliders, the great thing about a kite is that at 35 pounds you can throw it on your back and go climb any mountain.
Cathedrals that reach to the sky.
Rich Piccirilli, a member of Jerry Bird's skydiving team, is also an avid kite flyer and likes to fly Death Valley on free weekends. Bob Wills was at it again. He took a lightweight dirt bike, strapped a 12-foot kite to it, and set out after Evel Knievel. Off an 18-inch ramp on his first day out, Bob bested over 100 feet.
Beautiful!
Nothing to it.
Bob, come here!
After several hundred jumps at El Mirage Dry Lake, Bob wanted more distance. He streamlined his kite and put together a ramp 4 times the size of his old one. 250 feet. That's more distance. Bob wanted to try that one again. Hitting 65 miles per hour, completely wound out in 5th gear, Bob's bike begins to float even before it leaves the ramp. Once in the air, handlebars and brakes are useless for control, and Bob has to rely completely on weight shift to keep his 300-pound machine on course. Bob's best mark of the day was 301 feet, the length of a football field. In addition to his other claims to fame, Bob Wills runs the world's smallest airline. A pilot, co-pilot, a stewardess, and 1 passenger. Bob has managed to carry over 600 pounds with his 35-pound kite. On Bob's airline, their motto is, the stronger your grip, the longer your trip. Francis M. Regallo is the man who actually invented the kite concept. He and his wife built the first version as a toy for kids. When it outperformed all the other kites on the beach, NASA became interested and spent 10 years developing the concept in many forms, from motorized kites to giant Regallo wing parachutes to bring back nose cones from space.
Well, when I was working at NASA, I felt that a flexible wing could be flared just like a bird does. But nobody would believe that that was possible because they hadn't seen a man do it.
Today, over 90% of all hang gliders are Regallo wings. Mrs. Regallo had no idea when she sewed that first toy kite that it would become what it is today. Although Regallo originally developed the wing in his youth, he never actually tried flying one until he was over 60. Here he is, preparing to make his very first flight. Just before he took off, he asked, "Are you sure these things fly?" The father of the kiting movement makes a perfect first flight and beams like a kid who has just learned to ride a bicycle. Mr. Regalo made his first flight look easy, but for most, it holds a lot of surprises. Flying in high winds can be dangerous. Chris Price decided to give it a try in a 50-mile-an-hour gale. In these conditions, kites have been known to flip end over end as soon as the kite is released. Chris just barely had enough penetration to keep the kite upright. Like giant invisible ocean breakers hundreds of feet high, rotors are formed as the air currents go up and over the cliff. If you fly too far in back of the cliff, these vicious turbulent downdrafts grab you without warning and thrash you against the ground. Chris Price was flying too far in back of the cliff. Fortunately, Chris didn't break anything except his control bar, but he was sore for a week. To avoid rotors, landing on top should be done as close to the edge as possible. Within reason, of course. But just like in jumping, they say that any landing's a good landing if you can walk away from it. Pat Canary, truly a superb kite flyer, likes to fly over Malibu, California, where he perfected his own specialty, standing in the control bar. This stunt is especially tricky because if you should ever slip and fall in front of the bar, the kite will go into an uncontrollable power dive all the way to the ground. Pat took away Bob Wills' endurance record when he stayed aloft for nearly 5.5 hours. Pat said he could have stayed up longer, but he had a date that evening. Bob Wills just happened to be in Hawaii at the time when he heard that his record had fallen. Friends told him about some incredible cliffs over Waimanalo Bay. These cliffs are 1,000 feet sheer and face directly into the powerful trade winds which blow day and night. Sailplane pilots have known about this place for years, but this would be the first time anyone had ever attempted to jump off. When Bob stepped off the cliff at Waimanalo, he found himself sky surfing on the crest of an enormous wave of air. Hawaii is known for its big waves, but this is ridiculous. A 2,000-footer? But it was as smooth as glass and seemed to go on forever. Skybird, make your sail, and every heart will know of the tale. And head for the farthest shore,
Look at the way I glide, caught on the wind's lazy tide, sweetly how it sings. Rally each heart at the side of your silver wing. Skybird, skybird. Songbird, make your tune, for none may sing it just as you do. Look at the way I glide, caught on the wind's lazy tide, sweetly how it sings. Rally each heart at the side of your silver wings. Skybird, skybird, fly. Nightbird, find your way, for none may know it just as you may. Seek out your harbor of light. Let your song be heard. Rally each heart at the sight of your silver wings.
Bob was cold and tired, but happy. He had stayed aloft for 8 hours and 24 minutes, almost doubling the record. It's been said that if man had been meant to fly, he would have been given wings. Well, in their own special ways, Bob Wills, Jerry Bird, and all the other skydivers and kite flyers have found their wings. Wings that have transformed the air above into a playground in the sky.